Our first speaker post our break is our own U.S. Congressman Jeff Fortenberry, who we are very pleased and honored to have, not only here, but also representing our great state of Nebraska. So please, thank you for coming, Congressman. I'm going to invite Congressman Fortenberry to come up to the stage, and I'm also going to invite Dr. Deepa Gangahar to come up to the stage to give a small token of our appreciation to Congressman Fortenberry with a plaque, and then Dr. Gangahar will also be introducing Congressman Fortenberry.
As they say, information is power. As you probably will agree with me that the first half of the morning session was very given by a faculty which is, in my mind, elite of in their respective fields. And I'm confident what you hear in the second half of the morning session will be equally informative, provocative, and re-engage every one of us to the mission of this summit. And that is how the oldest democracy, America, and how the largest democracy, that is India, can work together to help the lives of all the people on the planet Earth. So towards that, I had the good fortune of introducing to you my friend, U.S. Congressman from Nebraska, Jeff Fortenberry. This is his seventh term as a congressman. Jeff is native of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and he did his Master in Public Policy from Georgetown and Master in Theology from Franciscan University of Steubenville. And his career is quite diverse. His experience in public service, policy analysis, and private sector. He served in the Lincoln City Council for 4 years before he went to Washington, D.C. And in the U.S. Congress, he's in the Committee on Foreign Affairs, on Middle East and South Asia, a Committee on Military Construction, and small businesses. He has served as economist and also in the private sector of publishing. He has traveled recently to India and met the leaders of both parties. And when Prime Minister Modi was visiting on a state visit to USA, had a personal audience with him and an in-depth discussion with Prime Minister Modi. No matter what hat Congressman Fortenberry wears, his moral compass always points to the north. Please welcome Jeff Fortenberry to discuss his views on India and the U.S.
Well, good morning to you all. Thank you so much, Dr. Gangahar, for not only that generous introduction, but for calling me a little while back and asking me to consider joining you here. As you all are very aware, this is Nebraska-Wisconsin football day, and I know that the schedule has been fluid based upon the unknown time of the game until very recently, so it's very generous of you all to take some time today to be with us. Let me start by thanking a couple of people. I don't know who the young lady was who greeted me, but when I come into public audiences, I'm not used to getting flowers. So whoever that was, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Dr. Gangahar mentioned that I had recently traveled to India, and actually I was discouraged from doing so. I spend a lot of my work in foreign affairs on questions of the relationship with Europe, to some degree Africa, highly concentrated in the Middle East, Central and South America, and touch upon Asia, in particularly South Asia on occasion. But I rejected that consideration. I said, no, I need to go there. And of course, we were in Delhi. We were put up in the old Imperial Hotel, which many of you are familiar with. I was also greeted by flowers there. I fell in love with India. The hospitality, the warmth, the vibrancy of culture, the aliveness, if you will, on the street, was compelling to me, and I'll unpack a little bit more of my adventure shortly. But let me say a few words of greeting as well to my colleague, Raja Krishnamurthy, a rising star in the Congress, and I say that with sincerity. Now, I'm on the other side of the political aisle, and when you say he's a rising star in his particular points of views and political party, that's a big compliment. I've watched Raja integrate into the body seamlessly, to be on point in debate on the toughest issues that we're facing as a nation, and I very much respect that, and we became early friends, and I hope that that friendship continues to develop. In fact, so much so, I even invited him to the game tonight, but he's not able to join us, unfortunately. He said he's going to Disneyland. I said, well, you might see more ups and downs on the ride tonight than at Disneyland, but glad to have you here, Raja. Good to see you. Let me also say hi and welcome to my good friend, Dr. Tharoor. We were together in India at this academic conference that I attended in February. His learnedness, his patriotism, his eagerness, his intellectual acumen to be able to pierce the veil and go to the heart of issues and unpack them with clarity and honesty, even when they're controversial, was highly impressive to me during that time together. And of course, I caught the tail end of your speech, and we're very grateful to have you here. Thank you so much, Doctor. I always get confused when I see my old friend, Mike Johans. I don't know whether to call him Mayor Mike, as I used to, Governor Mike, as I used to, Senator, or Secretary. The breadth of his public service was quite extraordinary. He was a mentor and a friend when I was a younger man. I had black hair, and I walked in his office when he was mayor of Lincoln, and I said, I want to be a member of the Lincoln City Council. And I think that was the day our friendship started. We appreciate you being here, Senator, Secretary. Good to see you as always. And thank you all who are participants in the Indian Association of Nebraska. The growing awareness, I think, in America's larger culture of the contribution of Indian Americans to what it means to be an American, the values that you bring, the focus on family life, the ideals of embracing entrepreneurship and making yourself better, personal responsibility, and then commitment to giving back, like through this association, is highly impressive to me. And again, I thank you for the kind introduction as well as the opportunity to be here with you. I understand Coach Osborne is going to be with you a little bit later. And you know, in Nebraska in the good old days, we used to run basically a variant off of 4 plays. When I was first running for Congress, Congressman Osborne at that time was kind enough to accompany me one day on a political campaign trip. And he had given us a bit of his time and needed to move on to another event. I urged him, I said, Congressman, can you stay a little bit longer with us? There's a group of people in another small town in southern Nebraska. They're eager to see us. Can you just give us a little bit more time? He agreed. So we pulled up to this event, and there were cars everywhere. I said, my goodness, this is really special. And so we walked in, and there the people spoke openly and loudly and plainly as the coach walked in, Tom Osborne is here. Coach came. Something wasn't quite right. I realized that we didn't walk into my political event, we walked into a wedding reception. And so I had the hard job early on of going in there and getting him out of the wedding reception as the bride and groom and others were taking pictures of him. But if you all know Coach Osborne, he kind of shook it off and forgave me quickly. I think you'll enjoy hearing from him later. And I know Dr. Gangahar and he are close friends. And again, I wish to thank Dr. Gangahar for his long friendship with me and leadership in our community. So, Nebraska's offense used to have a variant off of 4 plays. We used to basically run 4 plays. And frankly, I think there ought to be 4 plays in America. And I'm going to walk through them with you, and then I'll return and focus on the last one. The first one is what I call economic inclusion. We've been living for a very long time in an entrepreneurial winter where the number of small business deaths is greater than the small business births. This is a problem because most people work in small business. This is where a person who has a drive and innovation and an idea, can use the gifts of their own 2 hands or intellect and make something for their own good, the good of their families, in benign exchange with someone else in the other part of the community for the community's good, and it is the source of most new jobs in the country. But this decline in entrepreneurial momentum is a serious problem. And if you go deeper into the question, and perhaps Jim Clifton will later for you, it is two factors, regulation and healthcare. It's not my research, it's Gallup's. So trying to get to the heart of the healthcare issue is absolutely critical toward unleashing entrepreneurial momentum once again in this country. We could spend the rest of the day talking about my ideas, Raja's ideas, but we're stuck in Congress. One side put the current construct on us. The other side now tried to wholesale change it. It hasn't worked. Democrats and Republicans have to own this together now. And even though it hasn't manifested itself publicly, there is a whisper campaign going on inside of Congress. Raja, I hope you'll participate in that with us, and I invite you to, as to look for the overlapping areas, which may be 30 or 40%, to ensure that the persons who are consigned to the individual market have a system that's actually beneficial and working for them. That we move past just healthcare financing debate, while of course we protect the most vulnerable in our society, toward the real cost drivers, or perhaps the biggest one, which is the fragmented healthcare delivery system. If we do that, then we can help, perhaps more than other policy dynamics, return ourselves to entrepreneurial momentum and create the conditions once again for economic inclusion. Secondly, government decentralization. Part of the great tradition in America is that we have lots of government. It's just spread out. It's not concentrated in one area. If you look at the size of the federal government in 1990, it was about 1.25 trillion. Now we're at about 4 trillion. You have seen how rapidly we have concentrated power and authority, both in Washington as well as Wall Street, to be frank, over the last 25 years. And when we do that, and we get that out of balance, we run over the ability of local communities to both take responsibility for problems and to seize opportunity. One size doesn't always fit all. And it is the responsibility, I think, of those of us in governance to carry forward that great tradition of federalism. In philosophical terms, we call it subsidiarity. Those closest to a problem ought to be able to be empowered to seize the problem. Whereas layers of government farther away have different types of public goods that they should deliver. The roads and park system, that's the mayor's issue in the city council. North Korea, that's our problem in Washington. Healthcare, kind of somewhere in between. Has the nature of a public good, the nature of a private good, has the nature of being local, has the nature of being national. So honest discussion like this, I think, would help return us to this great tradition of federalism and create a 21st century architecture for government that is smart and effective. One of the problems that Raja and I face is this deep, deep cynicism toward the federal government right now, particularly Congress. And there's lots of reasons for that. Part of it is the behavior of Congress itself. Part of it is the ossified construct of the national political environment, one side versus the other, get him, get her, versus, okay, what's smart and effective here? Have a debate, stand on principle, compromise without being compromised. That's the nature of the system. Congress's approval rating is 8%. I keep trying to figure out who these 8% of people are, actually. I think our mothers might be in this group, paid staff maybe. It's not sustainable. We have to have a functioning government that has the trust of the people. I believe the call to public service is a high and noble pursuit. You see this in young people who are eager to lean into the structural problems of the nation. And that's the type of spirit that we have to tap back into. And frankly, I think the country is exhausted politically and is looking for a new paradigm in this regard. The third point is what I call conservation, the third play. What does that mean? We tend to think of conservation as the necessary and human desire to protect what is around us, the precious resources around us. And that's absolutely a part of conservation. But conservation has a deeper meaning as well in terms of society. As Indian Americans, as some of you as first-generation Americans, you know this very well. There is a body of wisdom, a collective set of experiences that we create formative institutions in order to carry that collective wisdom forward in time. That's family life, faith life, civic life, where we take these ideas, we take our great triumphs, we take our insights, we take what has been proven through experience to be good and rational, and we retranslate it for the next generation according to the needs of their time. A constant representation of that which is good and true and even beautiful. But when you lose these institutions for the transmission of wisdom, it's not fair. It's not fair to the next ones coming up. This is part of the reason we see so much brokenness and woundedness. So the contribution that you make, again, by adhering to norms of the culture from the old country, celebrating it and embracing the culture of this new country and contributing to it by creating stability in those areas in family life and faith life and civic life is essential to the well-being of America. Finally, the fourth play, foreign policy realism. Somewhere between an over-interventionism and an isolationism ought to be our next play as America. We were cast into the role of the superpower after World War II. And we have spent ourselves financially and with the blood of many sons and daughters of this country in creating the conditions internationally in which other peoples can find stability, build out their own economic systems, build out governance systems that are based on a fundamental principle here that we take for granted, that every person has inherent dignity and therefore rights. The way this is translated in India, of course, will be different than America or any other culture. But nonetheless, that fundamental proposition that all persons have inherent dignity and therefore rights ought to be the primary source of formation for both the market system as well as governance systems. And imperfectly, of course, that's basically what we've done for the last 75 years, but we cannot do it alone. At a World Economic Forum one time, I didn't whisper this, I said it loudly, I said it a little more stridently. I said, we have spent ourselves to give you the opportunity to build out systems in the name of justice for your own benefit. And you whisper to her, you're the superpower, you have to take care of this, take care of this. And then you turn around and for your own political well-being, malign us. It stops. The 21st century architecture of foreign affairs has to be authentic relationships built upon shared values, basic shared constructs of the ideals of governance and economic systems in the name of justice and fairness so that real opportunity is available for all persons. If we do this, if we can join forces with an emerging global power of India and others, we create the conditions in which there becomes a choice. Do you want to stand in a hybrid, communistic, capitalistic system? Do you want to stand with people who have nationalistic myths that they're trying to pursue for their own power? Or do you want to stand in a system that, again, is good and free? If we have a common bond as humanity, and that call is all the same for us, I think that's a lot more appealing than other systems of governance that are out there that use repression and fear in order to motivate toward belligerent behavior and others. This is what's so important about the India-American relationship in future. When I was there, I want to tell you, we had a number of wonderful experiences including a number of academic presentations. And you, Doctor, you may remember, I don't expect you to remember this, but I asked you a question that was bothering me. I said, India seems to me to be a society of contradiction. On the one hand, you pull forward in time this caste system, and yet you project this great pride in democracy and nationalism. And now, with the unleashing of the economic potential, even those who may not have had a chance in the past are seeing daylight as to how they enhance their own economic well-being and status in society. Explain, knit this together for me, and he gave a brilliant summary of that answer. But I'll give you another answer that I saw, Doctor, while I was there. And you didn't experience this with us. Our time was spent analyzing a number of the dynamics of Indian government and society, and including a dialogue with the Prime Minister Modi. But we also went to visit a slum. Now, as a Westerner who's fairly well off, the idea of going and staring at poor people just to gain the experience is a little bit, it was giving me a sense of hypocrisy and a sense of impropriety, if you will. And yet at the same time, I think it was important for me to go among your very, very poor. But you understand the contradiction there. I just didn't want to be seen as experiencing that for 30 minutes and going, check that off the box. I didn't want to offend the people who we were there to visit. So of course, we go to this particular place. I don't know where it was in Delhi. We're standing among garbage heaps, and I happen to look to my left. There's a man. He was camouflaged by all the garbage around him, just lying there, 15 feet away, covered in flies. I thought he might be dead, and I looked, he was still breathing. So, and then there's you've all perhaps had this experience, a nasty runoff coming out of this hill, off this hill, which was the slum in which we were about to enter, coming down the path where we had to walk. So as I was navigating this path, trying to not step in this seepage from the slum, there was somebody yelling. And as I got a little closer, I could see who he was. He was an Indian man who had a big white hair, big white bushy head of hair. And he was wrapped in, I don't know what you call it, the traditional just white garment, just around his waist. And he was yelling. And I assumed that he was a person that was mentally ill, or he was a person that was seeing the hypocrisy of rich Americans coming to stare at the poor in order for us to have a full experience of what India is like. As I got closer to him, I could hear exactly what he was saying. India is a great country, come back. India is a great country, come back. Back to this contradiction. Here is a man living in squalor who may himself not have a home. His face was weather-beaten, and yet he's very proud of what India is and what it stands for. And he's welcoming the stranger to see what he sees. And frankly, as good as our academic discussion was, perhaps the most impactful moment of me was being in that slum, the hospitality. Seeing the poorest of the poor who are organizing themselves around some projects, and the U.S. government had assisted in this regard. Be thankful for the visit, friendly. People who had taken just little 10 by 10 spaces and painted vibrant colors on the outside in order to make what they had a little more dignified and beautiful. I think that captures the essence of India. But it also points to this interesting contradiction, which is really amazing to me. Dr. Tharoor pointed out at the end of his talk important dynamics of the current U.S.-India relationship. I see India clearly as a rising power. I see India clearly as a rising ally. I also respect very much what you said in terms of India has not yet defined itself as what it wishes to be on the global stage. back to this point. The United States cannot do this alone anymore. The technology gaps have closed. The gaps between rich and poor are closing very much. The war-fighting potential, if we will, the national security apparatuses that we have, while we are a leader, those gaps will continue to close. Think what's going to happen in just 10 to 15, maybe 30 years, when you have the miniaturization of nuclear weapons, lasers, and drones. Delivery systems aren't ballistic missiles that can somewhat be tracked and, to a degree, managed. They're different. The idea of attack is different. And I've told my colleagues this. You know, if we get into some type of severe spat with North Korea, and let's say we could manage that and sanitize it from a distance so that all the impact is on them, don't think that they would use assassins, not use assassins in our own country to wreak havoc. The idea of continuing to race ahead in terms of military equilibriums, keeping advances one step ahead of others, I'm afraid that gap is coming to a close. Now, we have to protect ourselves, and are in a moment where we do have to rebuild military strength. But it ought to go part and parcel with what I call the 3Ds: strong defense, smart diplomacy, sustainable development. And let's focus on those last two for a moment. Back to India. What does India want to be to the external world? How will it take its emerging role as a global power and use that responsibly to help create the conditions for international stability? To be in authentic relationship with the United States, of course, properly inward-looking as any nation wants to be, but also outwardly looking as a nation of responsibility in partnership with those of us who have been blessed with the gift of so many extraordinary resources, talent, and governance systems built around the idea of justice. That's the question before us. But I see this as a very, very positive trajectory, which is only growing in momentum. A relationship that's been mildly friendly can become more proximate. A relationship that has been based upon some, again, mild economic interaction can become much more robust. A relationship in which we can get caught up in the narrowness of this problem or that problem, or a relationship in which we are together projecting out what the 21st century architecture of international relations is going to be. This is a moment for India. It really is. I see it on the rise. I have a picture in my phone that I keep as the main one on my screen. And it's of my wife and a young Indian woman who is a Muslim. From Delhi, we traveled to Hyderabad. And the United States is participating in a small project in which we are helping young children who have been susceptible to HIV because their parents carry it. And so this young Muslim woman has HIV, and she's clad. She's like this from head to toe. My wife is holding her baby. This fully burqa-clad Muslim woman and her are leaning, almost touching faces, and there's joy shining in the eyes. That's all you could see. There's joy in that woman's eyes. Now, when you look at the statistics of how many Indians from the Islamic tradition have gone to the Middle East to fight in the twisted, dark, theological, genocidal, murderous, barbaric savagery of ISIS compared to other places, it's very, very low. So this idea that you've been able to manage many traditions, different cultural mores. I found the food in Hyderabad to be much more spicy than Delhi. and somehow make it work, even within a caste system that seems to be contradictory to it, is fascinating. That's why I just had the good doctor sign my book. And with that, again, I want to thank you so much for your willingness to let me dialogue with you today. We have a shared responsibility as Americans to understand in depth, again, the interactions of the 21st century globally, and to create the world in which there is not just stability, not just opportunity, but opportunity that flows out of goodness and interdependency in community. The community of Omaha, the community of Lincoln, the community of Nebraska, but the international community as well. Thank you all so much for letting me be with you.